Great to be here. What an honor to follow that spirited conversation about the stay free ethos. And I think in many ways, this conversation flows naturally from that. My name is Jeff Wilser. I'm the host of the AI Curious podcast. And of course, I am joined by Teana Baker-Taylor, co-founder of Venice AI. Teana, great to speak with you.
Oh, Jeff, it's great to see you too. No pressure, right?
Tough act to follow. So on that note, I would love, I think for our session to be most productive, would love to kind of move from poetry to prose. We just heard a romp through, in a way, the intellectual history of self-sovereignty, going back to John Stuart Mill's, right? So it'll be tough to outdo the philosophy there. I'm not going to bring us through a Descartes, Rousseau, Plato session. So instead, I'd love to kind of focus more on, okay, those are incredible ideals. What does that actually mean in the prose of decentralized AI and privacy? So starting from that point, talk a bit about your foundational principle of privacy. As I understand it, Venice's cornerstone ethos is privacy. Talk about, kind of on a pragmatic level, almost why that's not just a platitude, but urgent right now.
Yeah, so I think there was a study that came out maybe 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, from the St. Louis Fed, which is weird, and Harvard, looking at the use of generative AI, and the usage is just explosive. Basically, it is the fastest adopted technology over personal computing, over the internet, than anything that we've seen to date. And so we know that, ChatGPT came onto the scene a couple of years ago. It was very accessible. People started using it. And it has very quickly become part of a lot of people's lives, more than I expected. People are using it for work. People are using it for personal reasons. And what people don't necessarily understand is every prompt, every question you ask ChatGPT, every image you create, all of that information is held by OpenAI. And it is shared on their servers, stored on their servers, and the response that you get back from the AI is also monitored by them. There's a whole host of safety features that they put on top of their models to prevent you from getting information that somebody within their organization deems you shouldn't be thinking about or you shouldn't be asking about, so they're heavily censored. But most importantly, if a government agency, just like Edward was talking about, came to them and said, give me all of Jeff's information for the last 6 months, they'll hand it over, because every question Jeff has ever asked is tied to his identity forever. So when you ask Venice a question, I don't see it, nobody in my organization sees it. The inference is sent to a decentralized GPU somewhere that doesn't know who you are, and it sends the response back to you via a proxy service. So nothing about the question or you persists anywhere, and it never, ever will. So if the government comes to ask me, I can't provide them any of Jeff's information because I never had it in the first place. And so that creates a lot of challenges tactically. How do you build a product? How do you, provide customer support? How do you ensure that you're able to even verify your paid users? Like there are a lot of things to navigate when you're using only decentralized infrastructure, only open source models, and a privacy infrastructure that basically relies on only using the user's browser. So that's the only place this information is ever stored. But when you think about the questions that you put into ChatGPT, for example, would you want that to be attached to your identity forever? Would you want it sold to advertisers? Would you want it handed over to a government? I mean, maybe some of the things are innocuous, but for example, I had a well-known CEO of a company that everyone in this room has heard of say to me, they had a heart condition, they had a serious incident. A year later, they had a follow-up, and they had to have a whole bunch of tests. They saw the doctor, gave him this report, and we all know what it's like when we go to the doctor, and they're very quick, right? You don't get the time to ask all the questions that you want to ask, and you don't always understand exactly what they've said. And so because Venice is private, and he has this assurance that this information isn't going to go anywhere else, he uploaded the entire PDF of all of the reports of his tests. and he asked Venice to tell him what questions he should dig further into with his doctor, were there holistic treatments that he could be looking into, on his follow-up visit, what should he raise again, what could he be doing and take, his own health into his own hands. And he said it was just extraordinary. And the next time he went to his doctor, he felt far more informed. He asked all these extra questions, and he really felt like he had a really better sense of his own kind of health care and the ability to take charge of it. And he would not have felt comfortable uploading that information.
We're saving lives here. This is great.
Well,
So,
I don't know about that, but
and to your point, Teana, on top of how sensitive this data is today, I would piggyback on your point. I would argue it'll become even more so tomorrow, 2 years from now. I think that virtually everyone in this conference, on this live stream, in this nation, eventually, most people will have some kind of AI companion that could act as a chief of staff or a therapist, right? And we might be sharing things like, oh, I'm not sure what to do about my partner. I'm not sure which person on my team to fire. We will be sharing the most intimate details of our life. Who's going to own that data?
Yeah.
How can that data be weaponized, monetized? So I think this will become only more and more urgent as time marches forward.
Well, if you think about it too, like there is this school of thought that we are already giving all of this information to social media, for example. And so we have become a bit desensitized to sharing information, our location, our payment information, who our friends are. But that information that we share typically, especially on things like Instagram, for example, is what we want people to see about us, what we want people to be influenced by, how we want to be seen. The conversations oftentimes that we're having with AI, and certainly in a character type environment or a persona type environment, are what we really think. Not what we want people to think, but these are very intimate and they're very personal. And so I always say to people, if you wouldn't want your journal or your diary floating around on the internet, why are you plugging all this information into ChatGPT? Because that's exactly what you're doing. And more importantly, we can't see it today, but I do think it's going to happen very rapidly. In 2 or 3 years, all of this data that we've put into AI is going to know more information about us as humanity than we know about ourselves. And if you extract that down, distill it to a very personal level, I mean, it is possible that your AI companion will know you better than you know yourself. And so, to me, that feels like something worth preserving and protecting.
Let's now get to the how that happens. You touched upon earlier decentralized governance and how it all fits together. Talk a little more about how blockchain fits into this, and then what are the challenges to truly build this at scale? Because I imagine it's a lot trickier to do this than co-location of chips, right? There's many advantages to build things a centralized way. So what are the biggest pain points you have to actually make a competitive AI products that does this in this decentralized fashion?
Yeah. So my co-founder, our founder, is Erik Voorhees. So if anybody is familiar with Erik, you will have a sense of the philosophy with which we started. So the first kind of revelation from Erik was that these tools were really cool. He was using them, and he did have these concerns about kind of sovereignty, open AI, and preserving privacy. But he thought it would be really hard to build. And he's not an AI person, and neither am I. And so we thought, well, this is going to be too hard. And when you look at how much money, OpenAI or Anthropic has spent on building their kind of black box proprietary models, we weren't prepared to do that. But it turns out
$7 trillion. No one's prepared to do that.
Right. But it turns out that the open source community has been creating models, open source models, and they were becoming increasingly more competitive. And we've seen over even the last couple of months, certainly Meta put out their 405B model. Well, they put out 3 models, but the latest open source models that Meta put out basically are more competitive or equally performant as ChatGPT, OpenAI, Anthropic, et cetera. So the open source models have become more competitive. And so if you have access to those models, then you're able to basically build a front end, right? So anybody can run an open source. You can go on Hugging Face today, find a model that you can run on your laptop or potentially your phone, very small, models out there. And so anybody can do this. And so if you want truly, truly private AI, then I encourage you to do that, right? But if you're not prepared to run those GPUs yourselves, we're an excellent alternative. And probably the closest that you're going to get to something that is, completely private. We use open source models. We use decentralized infrastructure, which then reduces any type of the permissioning that you have in a centralized ecosystem. One of our providers is Akash. So if anybody's familiar with Akash, which is a great example of, we were talking backstage around what role will tokens play in the AI ecosystem, and certainly they are contributing incredibly to the AI economy. So I pay for my inference and my nodes via Akash tokens. So shout out to Greg, building an incredible business. And so the decentralized nature of that is then all of those contributors can be using unused compute. They can put them online. You can bid for them. And unlike having a centralized infrastructure, you need to be really on top of what's going on, right? If you let the meter run dry on your servers, they will go offline, right? There's no backups. So that's another kind of critical element to that. And then I think looking into the future, we're starting to see announcements around smart agents and being able to have independent AIs that undertake activities for us. And I think that is going to be another great example of where tokenomics is really important. And that's not to say that, again, we had a debate backstage, could an AI agent not connect to your Citibank card? Well, potentially, but it would sure be a whole lot easier if it was just transacting on Near or ETH.
So Teana, no conversation about this topic would be complete without a question I'm sure you hate and get all the time, but for things that are truly open source and censorship resistance, there's a risk there, there's a trade-off of, okay, what if someone uses it to build a nuclear bomb, to create bioterror weapons? How do you, and you and Erik are very thoughtful people about this stuff, how do you think about that? How do you grapple with this issue, that tension, that trade-off?
Yeah, so, I mean, we do not have a board of directors or a regulator that we are having to report to that tells us that we need to put all of these safety features on. And truthfully, there are no regulations now demanding that people put these safety features in. And so that is, a cultural judgment call. We believe that people should have access to as close to raw machine learning as possible, and that all technology can be used for, nefarious or colorful purposes. And, we have terms and conditions that say that you can't use our service to, generate information or things that could hurt or harm people. We have an image generator. We don't censor that, so it does create not safe for work images if you are a paying subscriber. And there will be people that have an issue with that, right? But again, we're not here to kind of police AI. We don't think it's our job. We don't think anybody should. And that people will act responsibly, and for those that don't, then yeah, I mean, you can go to the internet and ask it how to make a bomb, and it will tell you if you're diligent enough, right? So we know that people ask those questions, especially when anytime you say, oh, our platform is uncensored, there's a handful of questions that everybody always asks. And I would just say, come on, people, rise above.
Don't build bombs,
ask a real intelligent
PSA.
question,
yes.
Right? This is incredible technology that can expand your intelligence, that can help you write or debug incredible code. I mean, the ability to create and build with this technology is extraordinary. And so my guess is that most people will use it for that.
Last question for you real quick, Teana. What is the most important variable, getting back to the theme of our session, the title, the fight for user-owned AI? What will it take to win that fight? Is it about getting the tech right? Is it about cultural awareness? Is it about a political struggle? What in your mind is a single variable we need to crack to win that fight?
Yeah, so we built Venice with the intention of being able to serve a mass market audience with a simple to use interface. Anybody in the room could go on your phone or your laptop right now, just type in Venice.ai, you'll get a screen, you can type in a prompt, and it'll take you into the platform, and you can create images and talk to AI. It is very user-friendly. The reason that we have tried to create as easy a service to use as possible is that we want people to start as they intend to continue. And it's a slippery, slippery slope if you start using all of these other services that are not protecting your privacy and are indeed censoring the information. And you think you're talking to a machine and you're actually talking to someone's safety committee. Like, the ability to change how you think and what you believe is very possible. So we want people to have sovereignty of thought, sovereignty of intelligence, and do that all in a private space. The tech is here, right? So, but it is a concerted choice on your part to choose that. And so I think that for me, it feels like if we go back to the beginning of social media, if you don't like the way it's turned out, then start as you intend to continue today and use the tools and services that will protect your privacy and won't nanny you into thinking what they want you to think.
Great note to end on. Teana, thanks so much. Thank you all.